We're going to go over a special topic today, which is profile and deployment management capability with Inside Pulse. So this is episode 6, just kind of grounding us in where we've come so far. And then we'll talk a little bit at the end of this slide about episode 7, which is going to be the second part of profile and deployment management. So like I said, episode 7, so far we covered estate management and compliance, targeted observations, real-time monitoring, our event correlation, then a lot of info on the data side in episode 4. Last episode, episode 5 was what platforms we support across OS and kind of what we see in the retail customer environment. And we're going to have a slide today that kind of goes over that as well. And then a 2-part series on profile and deployment management, which is kind of the bridging of the core observability and what happens when you see something in your environment to now how do you fix it, how do you correct it, how do you maintain consistency across your estate. So it's almost like kind of pairs up with each one of the episodes so far, but there's a compliance angle and an estate management angle here within deployments, so that whether you're in a hybrid estate or whether you run multiple brands or you have different customer experiences that are required at each store lane, you're able to do that now and keep that in sync with what we're introducing today around profile and deployment. So just talking about the high level discussion, we'll do a little bit reverse today. We'll start on the right side, but how things kind of flow through in the Pulse environment. There's an issue. So whether it's something that, in our case, we hope that no one's detected it. We hope that Pulse detects it. That's the best path for a retailer. But whether one of your store associates or your customers detects the issue, and then that turns into an observation. So it's like something's happening, and now let's get the details of, kind of what's happening in the environment. And then we go into an event, which is like, where and how many times has this happened, within our environment, and then remediation, which is, largely covered within, I was just talking to Jeff before the meeting, kind of what we see from retailers, what I've seen in my history. You kind of like have retailers doing a brute force attack. Like we'll do, everybody take 10 registers and go fix this kind of problem. And, I talked almost, I think in every webinar so far about, shaping the understanding of an outage in a retailer and what happens when you kind of, you get that thing in the pit of your stomach and it's the first report of an issue. So you start to go through your process, right? Like, is it one store or more? Is it a regional thing? Is it a global thing? How many stores are in the queue at the help desk? How many stores are impacted by this? Most of us have, some kind of unified presence technology, whether it's Slack or Zoom or Teams or whatever, and you start getting pings. In my old life, it was, if I got 4 or 5 district managers or store managers pinging me, I knew it was more of a widespread thing. So then, you start thinking about, what's the time to resolution here? So you open a P1, you involve multiple vendors, get on a bridge. Always it's the, kind of the table stakes of being in a network or a database, folks. But let's get the network team involved. Let's get the database team involved. Open up all the Sev1s and then start to get the logs back. Okay, let's read the logs. Let's look at our payment log. Let's look at our point of sale log and start, having to do that correlation. We have, a whole stream within Pulse around event correlation and how do something was happening at 12:05 and 17 seconds. How am I like correlating across these 4 or 5 logs, to kind of see where the issue is. But today we're covering profile and deployment management. It's highlighted in green here on our hexagons of what our core capabilities are, just jumping into the next slide, it's really about how do we define Pulse. So some good news, this is the most attended webinar we've had from a retailer perspective, so that's certainly really exciting. We have the greatest amount of retailers we've ever had on a webinar series so far. So it's obvious within the market. I think a lot of things we're saying are resonating. We're seeing this stuff real time within our Pulse retailers who already have the solution, and we're looking to extend, some better capabilities out to our retail customers and to folks who, we're just learning, about their environments and look for a relationship. But Pulse really is the next generation of observability in retail. I think, for folks that have been on, you heard me talk about a lot so far about how stores deserve this observability as like one of the table stakes, a basic requirement for them. And you think about the digital tools that are out there, e-com, an order management, a CRM, a loyalty platform. You kind of get those things, but the store solutions. A lot of folks are, in maybe a newer POS, or you're in one that you're trying to value engineer. So knowing what's happening out there and reducing that friction at checkout is really what Pulse does. So from a technical standpoint, Jeff's here. He certainly could speak a lot more intelligently about this than me, but we have a very lightweight application on the client side that's kind of like our node-based application. And then that talks back to a very robust suite of functions at the center. And what we try to do is understand what's happening at the register, give some features, functions at the register that don't impact your bandwidth, that don't impact your ability to transact, but still can kind of be that control tower to help you see what's happening across your 500, 1,000, 10,000, 20,000 stores, all in one place. So it's like a single pane of glass, retail control tower, and it's bringing you visibility across everything you do in a store, from point of sale. I call it a cash lane, but it's really any revenue generating thing, or even, starting to get more into IoT within your stores. How do you know what's happening with all those things, and how do you look at them all from one place and doing it in real time versus, this log retrieval process, and then you're grepping or you're searching through a log trying to find certain things. This happens, and our end state goal and our happy path is that we find these things for you as a retailer before you have to hear it from a store manager or a customer or something on Facebook or somebody who called into your call center. Second part of this slide really is what we're talking about today. That's the deployments, and it's an extension of the next logical step of, hey, we know all these things are happening in our environment. How do we go about correcting them? And it could be we're going to everything from your installation to your patching, something that's specific to a store, your snapshot and rollback, so that we're ensured. Red Iron's been doing this a very long time, 26 years. We have worked with about 100 of the large retailers, 1,500 successful projects, and growing. So how do we take the subject matter expertise of Red Iron and we really understand what's happening in your stores to make that seamless for your technology organization? This is a bit of an eye chart on purpose to show that, we know there's all these things happening across these lanes that go up and down on this screen, whether it's your OS, your hardware, your software stack, what you're doing in payments, how you enable your associates from a mobility standpoint, what kind of, what's happening, just something very simple from a printer standpoint to, how many cuts are left on that, the blade that cuts the receipt for you, what's happening within your IoT environment in your stores, and then your networking. How do we bridge all that together? And if you move your eyes down to the middle of the slide, you'll see that we have this intelligence layer in Pulse, which is kind of that communication that I spoke about before, node into center. And then, going left to right on the bottom is Pulse can help you inform your enterprise data. So what we're all about at Red Iron is results and driving your business outcomes. And, in another version of this slide, there certainly could be, after your enterprise data layer, a whole bunch of arrows and boxes that come, whether you want to inform an AI use case, if you want to do, some type of reporting for your stores. But it's all about Pulse being an enabler to drive the business outcomes for your fleet of brick and mortar. Today, we're going to cover really the 4 deployment types within Pulse. I have about maybe a minute or two to go with the deck, and then we're going to get into some demo and the tool. But we support really 4 types of deployments, installers, deltas, basic file delivery, and then sparse deployments, which Jeff's going to get into and talk about. There's common deployment features across all these types of deployment, which are really tuned for the retail environment, whether it's some type of continuous file delivery. But I think one of the important topics is this principle of caching, right? So we've heard from a lot of our retailers that, and from my history being a head of stores and running a technology organization for a retailer, we don't want to be choking up bandwidth with a whole bunch of noise. So you think about the way Pulse deployments were built. It's built to download, common data, whichever register or endpoint or node is available within the store to kind of call for that data first. And then, sibling nodes within that same LAN can pull and get that data so they don't have to go back out to the big eye or back out to, your cloud provider to have to pull that data again. The point is it's compressed, it's cached, and then it allows for efficiency across within your store so you don't have to go back out again to re-get it. What Jeff's going to go over today, really, I put in 3 buckets: the model of deployments, kind of the execution engine and the life cycle of what it looks like, and then what's happening within your store at that time at scale. So we're very happy to support a 500 register retailer all the way up to 100,000 and beyond lanes of a retailer with this technology. So I think, before I turn it over, I think we got a question, so that's good. It'll just take me a second. How are retailers bridging observability and deployments? Are teams able to take real-time insights and directly trigger or validate deployments from the same platform, or are they still relying on separate tools? So thanks for asking that question. We always appreciate the interaction here at Red Iron. And the answer is actually the deployments and the observability piece are all in one place. So you've heard me reference retail control tower, single pane of glass. All those things happen within Pulse. So you can have a full life cycle kind of from the beginning all the way to the end. So when something's happening, and then kind of how do you fix it? So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, and we're going to take a look at the tool.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So what I'm going to walk you through here is what we call a sparse deployment. So the characteristics of this, so in a traditional deployment, the instruction set and the content travel together. So this is the model for an MSI or whatever you have, or if you want to just distribute content through Pulse, that's how you would typically do it if the same content gets delivered to every node. But the case I'm going to walk you through today is what we call a sparse deployment, where the decision about what content gets delivered to the node is deferred until we let the node make that decision. So I just generated a bunch of content to simulate this scenario. So there's a bunch of POU and promo files for just 1,000 store retailer. It's just nonsense content, but I just wanted to generate something for demonstration purposes. And, the size of each file ranges from a couple hundred K to, 10, 14, 15 meg. So, it's pretty representative for a workflow that might exist out in the real world. So the scenario is, nightly corporate will produce POU and promo files. They have to get to the stores reliably and, on a schedule. And so we create a deployment to satisfy that. So the deployment has 2 characteristics. One is the instruction set. So that's the same on every store. So every store back office is going to be pulling from this data. That's the scenario we've got. This isn't going all the way down to the nodes. It's just going to back office. And it's, you would use it for anything you needed that is sort of support based for POU updates. So, might be label printing, might be whatever. So the content is there. And so what we do is we create a deployment, and that is a mix of instructions and content. So let me just walk you through what a deployment looks like when you create one on Pulse. So I'm going to just create a brand new one. We'll just call it demo deployment, and it's like for the demo. So the content that can be provided to the deployment either comes from a file or a Git repo. So if you're maintaining this somewhere in a Git repo, that's perfectly fine. Every time you create a version, we'll go pull the latest for you. But if it's a file, you just choose the file and upload it. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that wasn't outside your visibility. So a couple of examples. If I choose an RPM, which is just an installer, there's no steps. It's going to deliver that to every node that is subscribed to this deployment. And the only thing interesting about that is the activation timing. So you can say, install it as soon as the content is available on the node, or you can specify a date certain for the installation. So once that time passes, that's when the activation will happen. So there's 2 main phases in a deployment. There's sort of delivery of content, and then there's activation. So the delivery of content will happen as soon as a version is available, subject to node blackouts. Like you can tell nodes don't take any deployment contact, during working hours or what have you. You can set up blackouts for them. But in terms of delivery of content, that happens as soon as the node has exited a blackout period. And then the activation timing can be a date certain, or it can be as soon as possible. If I choose, say, oh, I'm in now. If I choose, say, a patch file, that's like that's a delta. That's a common sort of format that you would use for updating in-place configuration files. So it says, look for this and replace it with that instead of just overwriting everything in the content destination. So this introduces one more field. It's the destination. So this sort of says for each node, where am I expecting to deliver this content? For an installer, that doesn't exist because the installer will run that show. But if you want to deliver a patch file, you would specify, some sort of a local directory or what have you. And this overridable check mark just means that that's the default. That's where it'll go if no one intervenes, if no one sets a setting that changes that. But this allows you to check it as overridable so that certain nodes or certain profiles can say, hey, for this, put it here. For my lab machines, I want to put it somewhere different than for my, production workload. So it lets you publish that as an option. And the final one I'll show you is, I'll choose this complex deployment with scripts, which is, content plus scripts. And what that does is it opens this advanced panel. So for each of the 6 steps of a deployment, you have the ability to govern what happens, and that can be built-in actions that are defaulted to the Red Iron actions. So, the deployment is copy all the files to the destination. We do this in a way that's atomic. So just whichever OS you're targeting, we try and take advantage of whatever facilities are there to, make sure we can lock the file, lock all the files, make sure that we're not going to run out of disk space during the copy. So we try and make this as atomic as possible to, preclude failure. We want any failures that might happen, we want to happen before we're actually touching content. So that's what this snapshot is about. So before we do the deployment, we take a snapshot, and that can either be, everything in the destination or only the files that I'm about to replace, or because you've provided me a zip file with a bunch of scripts in it, I can choose any of the scripts that you have, and those are available to be authored by you. We have aliases. Red Iron has aliases for every sort of common operation. So anything you see in these drop downs, you can just call an alias. So it'll be RI snapshot, RI fetch, RI deploy. So every step can be overridden to use your scripts in place of ours, and your scripts can borrow upon ours. So your deploy script could also use we call it the two-phase copy. So number one, we make sure that all the target files can be locked and the content has been expanded, and then we do a commit, and that does all the files at once. So just, again, just to try and make sure we're delivering a robust deployment environment.
And Jeff, I think just,
Yep.
One thing is,
Yep.
us having, Red Iron have been doing this for a very long time and knowing what retailers need from a sensitivity standpoint. So we're very conscious of, the business outcomes, not wanting to quote unquote break anything in production, and leveraging, everything we've seen over, all the projects and all the feedback from retailers to give it in a safe way so that you can do these deployments without causing a large scale outage, right? Like keeping the guardrails in mind.
Yeah, I mean, that really in everything we build, we're trying to, leverage our understanding of the retail environment as, we've understood it either by our past experience or by customers. We sort of have a good broad understanding of what each retail environment entails, and then specific understanding for whatever partners you're working with in terms of POS vendors or, hardware or OS. So we're trying to leverage as much of that knowledge into the products that we serve as possible. So now I'm going to look at our example one. So I created this one previously. So I just called it PLU updates. It's for nightly PLU. I've already defined what the content is. There's nothing, I'm doing all the default actions in advance, so we don't need to look at that. But there's this tab called remote. So this is where you specify what a sparse deployment is. So my remote endpoint. So I'm just pointing back to this same directory that I showed you before. So I've just got a light FTP service that points back to here. So I'll just go in there. So it's a user, and you specify your authentication. And then you can validate that you have connectivity. And so the only thing here of note is that for the fetch script, I'm going to execute this fetch.cmd, which is in our package. It's one of the instructions that we have. And so I'll just show you that. So this is the entire command. It's just, I'm going to do ri fetch, which knows how to navigate the network back to our endpoint. And it's going to pull any content from this version that starts with anything, but it has the store number as pulled from the environment .dat. So if I look at my existing destination, I've got two files here, a POU 888 dat and a promo 888 dat. They're 10 and 4, so relatively sized. From yesterday at 2 is when I did it. So all of that content is present in there. The destination, and the activation timing are set because I want this to be consumed as soon as it's ready. So now what I'm going to do is go and trigger the actual creation of the version. So we do everything through versions. So right now I'm at version 30 of this deployment that I created. That's neither here nor there. It just helps us, track what version is there. So each time I go in and make an adjustment to my configuration and re-save that configuration, no create a version. But I don't have to do that. I can just call an API endpoint. So that, what you see in that curl command is all you need to do to generate a new version. And what that does is say, okay, this version is for remote content. I'm going to go and I'm going to look at all the remote content and compare what I've already snapshotted. If anything's different, I'm going to take a snapshot of that, and I'm going to publish to all the nodes who are subscribed to this deployment that a new version is available. And so they have then the ability to go and fetch down the new commands, which are the same as before, but they'll fetch down the new commands and they will run the fetch, and it'll say, is there anything for me on the endpoint? So
I think this is like an important piece, right? Because
yes,
most retailers have like some set of upstream systems that have to go finish a bunch of tasks before they want to invoke the deployment down to the nodes, right? So the curl, or like just calling this API, is the simplest way to say everything else is done, it's ready now. Pulse, go do your thing.
Right. Yeah. In a real world, you probably wouldn't use curl. You'd have you've got whatever's producing all the output, content, and it would just call a web endpoint. But I'm just showing this to demonstrate that there's really nothing to it. You really the important bit is this last one, which is ridemo.pou. So ridemo is our org, POU is the feature, and POU updates is the deployment. So you just navigate it like that. Because I'm running my test environment, I don't have authentication. We could talk through how authentication works, but for this purposes, that's it. You can also specify release notes and what you want your activation timing to be at the time you call into to our endpoint. So all of that is available to you. So basically, it's built for periodic generation of content that you want the nodes to subscribe to. So I'll just hit this. And then what we're going to do is that's pulling. Okay, so now that has created version 31 of the deployment. It just gives me that as the response. So now this, that was quick. So this data has been updated. It's now the new data has been delivered to the store. So what happened in that short window? And the window was short because I've got admin, so I set all my timings to just like 30 seconds. So nothing was really, usually you would have to wait for, our typical check-in is like 5 minutes, but I didn't want to have to entertain anybody for that period of time. So, so that content is delivered there. So what happened in that period is it pulled any new content. All I had done is I copied 2 new files, the 888 files. So there wasn't much new content to pull. And then the instructions were delivered to the node. The node pulled up the fetch and went and delivered the content. Now, why did that node do that as soon as it was available? I can show you. So if I look in our profile dashboard, under the pause data category, I've got this feature called POU, and here is my rule for how I get content. So every version that I've ever published is available here. It expires after 2 months, but Every pertinent version that has been deployed is available here. So if I made a mistake, I can roll back to a previous version just by saving this and publishing it out, and it'll tell it, hey everyone, whatever happened was wrong. Go back to version 26. We'll figure it out and get you back. But right now, this node has live updates, which means I'm looking for new updates all the time. And whenever I see one, I'm going to do it. And then whatever the activation timing is, I'm going to affect it. So the last piece I'll show you is the observability side, which was a question earlier. So if I go in and look for my observations, so as soon as you create a deployment, you get observations out of the box. You don't have to create them yourself, but you can create them yourself. You can add observations. So if you have custom script that you have data that is output during that period that you're interested in, you can create observations to capture that. So right now, the default is, look, I have 4 successful steps in my deployment. So one node, so I'll click on this, it'll take me to my node, and I'll see my 4 successful steps since midnight. So basically it tells me, at this time it was fetched, this time it was staged, this time the snapshot was created, and this time the deploy is completed. And for each of these, you can see what actually happened on the node. That one's not interesting. This one is the one where we're actually doing the work. So during the fetch stage, here's my command that I showed you. It did an RI fetch. I've replaced the environment variable with the actual value, so you can validate that. And then it just tells you what it's doing. It's retrieving content. And then I go to the snapshot, and it's telling me what I snapshotted. I captured those 2 files from the destination. And then if I go to the deploy completed, it'll tell me, hey, I deployed these 2 files. So, you've seen everything. You've got visibility into everything that happened there. And again, just like any other Pulse thing, you can create notifications, you can chart it, you can graph it, whatever you want to do on that data. And just one last thing, when I look at this node, I've now got a new property that says, what is my latest deployment version for PLU? And it's at 131. So there again, you can just look at all my nodes in this region or all my nodes across the chain. Is anyone not on the latest version? I can then dig into that, find out what happened, why they didn't, what failures they might have had. So, we've got the visibility that we built into Pulse is leveraged through deployments. So everything that happens there is then visible and tracked and available for event notification or distribution. So I think I did pretty well on time. I'll turn it back to Mike if there's anything to wrap up.
Sure. Yeah. Just really quick, typical. And thank you very much, Jeff. I think, really good for, kind of our first entree into deployments here for the retailers. Just a couple things. We've got 2 minutes left. I would ask anybody, please reach out from a retailer perspective. We would love to do a one-on-one and a sizing and understand your environment so that we can, show where the Pulse benefits are for you and make sure that it makes sense for your environment. That's number one. We have a whole bunch of retailers in queue that want to know about, going through our reliability assessment and what it looks like to evaluate your store state. And number 2, Friday, May 8th is going to be the second part of deployments. And we'll dive into some deeper topics on deployments on the May 8th webinar. So please sign up. Thank you for coming. We always try to end on time. I think we're right at it at 12:29. So thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody. And please feel free to reach out with questions.